Welcome to the Preserving Family Podcast. The purpose of this podcast is to equip you to gain insight, information, and inspiration to help you protect, teach, and guide your family during these turbulent times. Our goal is to provide tools and resources to help you strengthen and preserve your own marriages and families. Now here are your hosts, Dr. Mark and Janie Ogletree.
Welcome to Preserving Families. Thank you for joining us. We are so appreciative of our wonderful audience. So many of you are so complimentary, so kind, send us so many nice notes and questions, and we really appreciate your participation with us.
Yeah, sorry we don't answer all of them.
Someday we're going to get to that, right? Life is insane. Okay, but we really do appreciate it. We just wanted to give a shout out again to our future upcoming church history tour, which is a year from now, next summer, in the first week of August. And it's going to be amazing. We're going to start in Philadelphia, go up through New York, end in Kirtland, Ohio. We had our recent state conference this weekend, and it was kind of focused on the restoration. And it just made me super excited for next year, study of the Doctrine and Covenants, and to be able to be back in those places and to be able to study all the amazing stories that happened in church history, the things that went on in all these special places, to be there where the Spirit is so strong. If you are interested, or you want to bring your family along, your older kids, your teenagers, your YSAs, your parents, your extended family, we would love to have you. We have a great group already. We do have a few more spots. It's filling up fast, which we're super excited about.
I think we're excited. We would be excited to have another bus, and so one bus is getting almost full.
That one's almost full, but we thought maybe a 2-bus. So if you want to join us, let us know. And Mark, you can give us the information on that, since I always mess that up.
No, you can email us at preservingfamiliespodcast@gmail.com. So
preservingfamiliespodcast@gmail.com. Okay.
That's right.
Awesome. We can give you some more information. So
yeah.
Anyway, just want to do that little plug.
All right. Shall we introduce our topic now today?
Let's do it. Okay. So today we thought we'd kind of take the opposite perspective. I feel like we always talk about things that we should be doing in our families to strengthen and preserve our families, right?
Right.
Which, again, the whole reason we name it Preserving Families is
President Kimball's quote that the time will come when only those who believe deeply and actively in the family will be able to preserve their families in the midst of the gathering evil around us. 1980 General Conference and its prophecy. I mean, it's happening before our eyes, right?
Yeah. Sometimes we just feel like that mist of darkness is just all around us as we are trying to navigate and raise our children in this wicked world. And so, again, I feel like we're just always talking about what to do. Today, we're going to take a different vantage point. We're going to talk about what not to do.
Yeah, what not to do. I love that.
So sometimes we kind of just sit back. And again, we're not claiming to be perfect parents by any stretch of the imagination. And like Mark always says, it's easy now that we're empty nesters to be perfect parents, right? Like now we've got it all figured out because all of our kids are gone. So no, we are not claiming to be perfect parents, but we have studied a lot of principles and a lot of research, and so we've
been exposed to a lot of real life experiences, right? And
between our church callings, Mark's clinical practice, and we just feel like we've seen a lot. Let's just say that, and we've seen a lot of awesome parents and a lot of great things people are doing, but we've seen other things too that we just scratch our head and be like,
you're like, are you sure?
Is that really what you want to do to your child? Anyway, let's run through that. Let's today just have a good discussion on what not to do as parents.
Okay. I'm ready.
Okay. The first one we kind of came up with is we should never name call our children or shame or guilt or be critical or label them. Okay, yes, we can discipline, we can teach, but we don't ever want to get into those categories, especially name calling. You dummy, you idiot, you stink, sometimes, we've heard people say that to their kids, and they remember those forever. Those are the things that they remember. You can even be the best parent the other 90% of the time, but the one time that you called them an idiot or a dummy, they literally remember that forever.
Yep. Yeah, and Janie, one of the things I remember is, if it's okay to tell that story, is because you shared it with me, but it was your dad, right? Where his dad told him when he was singing in church as a teenager or something, that I don't know what he said. I don't want to, but it was like, hey, that wasn't...
Basically leaned over and implied that he couldn't sing.
Yeah, you don't... And from that day on...
My dad never sang again.
Never once opened his mouth during a church hymn, right?
Literally never.
I mean, so when you say stays with them forever, I mean, that's legit. And I could even look back on some of the names I was called as a kid, and you're like, yeah, I vividly remember that, you know? I mean, it does stay with you. And I think, Janie, and you can steer this wherever you want to, but one of the things I really believe is when the world is crazy out there as it is, and it only is going to get crazier, and who knows what our kids are exposed to, even at church or at school, but the home has to be the safe place and the refuge. That has to be the one place that you're not called names, that you're not made fun of, that you're not abused, you know, and so it's really funny. Years ago on Saturday Night Live, and we'll put an asterisk. Okay, we don't watch that anymore. But years ago,
back in the classic ones,
back in the classic days. But there was how they made their little commercials, and one of them was it was like a dog training kind of thing. Will Ferrell was the owner of the dog, and the product was called Dissing Your Dog. And instead of punishing your dog in a certain way, it was you called your dog all these names, And once again, it's funny because sometimes I look at people and I want to say, did you watch that video clip? Is that where you went, to school to learn how to diss your kids? Because it's just never really, it's just not acceptable, right?
No, it's horrible. And also, even just the labeling of, oh, well, Johnny's the smart one and Susie's the pretty one. Or they're the athletic one and that one, you're the smart one.
He's not so athletic, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's sad when we label our children like that because it's like they can't break out of those labels.
Right.
Oh, I'm pretty. That must mean that I'm not. Or you called him smart and me pretty. Well, that must mean I'm not very smart. Or, oh, honey, you are, but your sister's pretty, but you're the brains. Like, people they don't recover from those labels. Let's not do that to our children.
Elder Holland's talk, A Prayer for the Children. He if anyone ever wants to look that talk up, I think it was given around 2003. A Prayer for the Children, but he literally talks that way about that. Janie, it reminds me when you said labels we've seen this a couple times where parents have literally told one of their children, you probably aren't going to go to college. They're telling them this like in elementary school, So you probably want to think of another route, and it's like, why not build them up and encourage them and
help them see that they can do anything that they set their mind to.
Yeah, I've said this before, but in Elder Holland's very first book, However Long and Hard the Road, the dedication in the cover of the book says, to my mom and dad who believed their children could do anything. Wouldn't you rather have those parents than the ones saying, oh, yeah, actually,
give it up, just quit.
Yeah, we really don't think you could do anything, so good luck with that.
Yeah, and then the last part of that is we should never shame or guilt our children. And shame is telling someone that they're bad, not that what they did is bad. And so, yes, we all make mistakes. And we have to teach our children if they make a mistake, but we shouldn't shame them and make them feel like a horrible person. We should teach with love, correct, never make them feel like they're a horrible person.
So I think one of the great opportunities that parents have is to build up their children, to heal them with kind words, and to make them feel that their home is a heaven and a haven on earth. But we can do that with compliments and praise and saying kind things. And children, once again, really, really respond to that. We even see it in our adult children where they like it when we say nice things about them. Another mistake that we see out there sometimes is when there's a perception that in a family there's a favorite child, And kids are pretty smart, right? They look around and see that, okay, my brother makes straight A's. He's the quarterback on the football team. Everyone seems to like him. That's not who I am. And I'm in trouble a lot with my parents. And so obviously he or she's the favorite child, not me. It's a perception, right? It's a perception, from other children in the family. I don't think the parents would say, oh, yeah, they are my favorite kid. In fact, if any parent ever says to their other children, that's my favorite kid, that's not good. You probably need to go get some help, right?
But we've also seen the opposite. When parents have a child who's very troubled or going through a lot of hard things, that the other children perceive that that's who all their kids their parents spend all their time with. And so then they're jealous of that person too. So it could be either extreme. But I like what you said, Mark, that a few minutes ago, that no matter, anytime you're with your child, they should feel like they're your favorite child, right? And that we need to be spending lots of one-on-one with each child, taking time to develop relationships with each one of them, so they don't feel jealous of other children, that they feel like they are your favorite.
Right. And I think, Janie, the other tricky thing with that when you have multiple children is that our relationship with each child is going to be different. It's not going to be identical. And so with one kid, we may do this thing, and with the other
have
kid,
to spend greater amounts of time with one child at certain times and with another at certain times. But I know, but for a child, all they see is that mom and dad are spending so much time and effort and energy with one child.
Right.
So from their perspective, we just need to make sure that we are spending that one-on-one, that we are building that relationship, that we are taking the time, because I think sometimes we do just get so caught up, either
Consumed.
children, with either that are giving us a lot of trouble or children that are our superstars. And so,
yeah, we want to make sure we're divvying out and spreading out the love, to all of our kids, and making all of them feel special, because they are.
So when we talk about ruining our kids, another thing...
That's our goal, right?
Another thing that we've kind of noticed and we've seen over the years with certain people is that they don't help their kids develop their talents or discover their abilities and who they are. So we knew this family once in another state that we lived in that had 3 or 4 children that were amazing athletes.
Like uber talented athletically, yeah.
And in our... Like we would notice things, right? In primary and young men and young women's, we would notice these kids' ability, but they never played a sport, never were on a team, never took classes, never did anything, and because their parents didn't want to drive them to practice.
Yeah.
And their mom would just be like, nope, I'm not doing that. I'm not taking my time away from that. And these kids, with younger, were just great kids. And as we saw them got older into later high school age, they all got into drugs. They were
just we'll just say they were kind of off the straight and narrow path for a while.
And it was so sad because they had no purpose. They had nothing to do after school. They had all this time and probably felt like their parents didn't care about them.
Yeah.
And so that was a real heartbreaking thing. So we as parents, opposite the things we do need to do is discover early and often what their talents are and help them promote that. If our child likes art, get them all the art supplies that they like. If they want to play soccer, let's put them on a little soccer team and give it a try. Doesn't mean they have to be the superstar. Just because they're not the best one on the team doesn't mean that they can't enjoy it. I think parents get caught up in, they're not good at that. Well, give them a chance. They're 5. You know what I mean?
Or even if they are 5 and they do try it and they're not that great at it, as a parent, sometimes we want to pull the plug and it's like, hey, wait, like I know... Janie, for me in baseball, I mean, the first few years I was in baseball, I was not the best player on the team. I mean, that came a lot later in my life. But if my parents would have just yanked me out after that first year, where I actually hit the ball and ran to the pitcher's mound, I think, or something, I mean, that would have been the end of that for me. But over time, I just kind of improved every year, and then pretty soon I was pretty decent at it. But anyway, I think, Janie, that what we have to do as parents and grandparents, I think grandparents can have a special gift here of almost looking at all this from a different vantage point. We see things that our kids can't see sometimes because our own adult children are in the trenches so much that they can't really see clearly. But our job is to pray and to be in tune and to seek our Heavenly Father's will and just pay close attention and notice. And I still remember that our oldest daughter, we weren't quite sure what her gift and talent was going to be, until she was about in 7th grade. But one of the things that we noticed is she loved racing people. She was always racing and she would win. She I remember us saying, you should be on track. You should be in cross country. She didn't even know that was a thing, but she went into that and she had an incredible career in that and still runs today.
And she was also painfully shy.
Yeah.
But we noticed that at home, she would sing beautifully. She had this gorgeous voice.
She was on key, like perfect key at age 4, right?
Yeah, she just had a beautiful voice. But we put her in like voice lessons. And I remember the first concert, we were on the front row and we couldn't even hear her because she was
4
so
feet in front of us and we couldn't hear her.
She was so shy and we could barely come out of her mouth. But as she got older, she has a beautiful voice and was in top choirs and things like that in the school. And still sings today. And so we just don't give up on them. If they love it and they have a passion for it, even if we think that they're not talented or gifted at it and they love it, let them pursue it, you know, because who knows at what point that they are going to master it and become good at it.
So have that eye, be looking, and grandparents, you too, can be looking and paying close attention to. I know, Janie, you're really good at that as you go into our children and children's homes and see the grandkids, and you're like, oh my gosh, he is so good at art, or she is so good at dance, or whatever it is. And
it's just fun to see their abilities and the talents that they come to this earth with.
Right. Here's another mistake I think that families can make sometimes. Well, I think a lot of us do, because I really do think we're on autopilot when it comes to our families and how our families turn out. But one way to ruin your kids or your family is just not to have a plan at all, to have no plan in place whatsoever, no vision, no roadmap, no direction at all, and just kind of haphazardly just take life one day at a time as it pops up, but not really having any goals or any objectives or any purpose.
I feel like that's just playing defense. Like you're literally just, doing whack-a-mole all the time.
Yeah.
Instead, we need to be on the offense. We need to have a strategy, a plan. What do we want our children to accomplish in their life? What do we want them to look like when they leave our home? What do we want them to do when they're adults? What kind of values do we want to teach? All those things are great discussions to have, among parents. Like we need to have those early and often.
Well, I think Janie too, I'm not cutting you off, but I think too what that does is it then shapes and molds where we start driving, so to speak, right? In other words, if one of our goals is, we want our kids to go on missions. Okay, well, we need to kind of drive through, whatever that looks like in terms of, well, have we had the missionaries over to our house? Have our children ever seen the missionary training center in real life?
Helping them, how does their relationship with Jesus Christ? Are they developing testimonies? Are they,
can we help them teach the gospel in our home at age 7, or whatever? I mean, we're getting them ready. Our home becomes a missionary training center.
Can they talk to people? Can they, look people in the eye? And can they work? All those things that, whatever the vision is, and that's going to look different for every family.
Right.
I know a lot of families have a motto, or they'll have a theme, or they'll have a mission statement for their family, which I think is amazing.
Right.
That they live by, that everybody knows, like we've talked about before, ours was kind of pure steel, that we wanted our kids to be tough and to be resilient and to be hard workers and all that includes, and becoming pure steel, and very faithful in the gospel. And so that was kind of what that entailed for us. But a lot of people have different themes. They'll write out a whole mission statement, which I think is awesome.
Yeah.
If your family, everybody has the vision of what it is, everyone buys into it, and everyone knows what's expected and what's...
That can shape where you go on vacation. It could shape what you do in your free time. It could shape the activities that your children get involved in, or what you decide not to. But like Bill Doherty said, the great scholar at the University of Minnesota, that if we get in the Mississippi River without a paddle and without a plan, we're going to end up in the Gulf of Mexico if we're not intentional, if we're not paddling, right? And so let's have a plan, let's have a strategy. Our family is the most important entity in our whole life, and it's amazing how we can have goals and plans for everything else except for the very thing that matters the most, and that's our marriage and our family.
So another thing that will definitely ruin our kids is if we as parents are hypocrites. If we try to preach things that we don't actually live, our kids and teenagers can spot a hypocrite from a mile away.
And it makes what we say very hollow, right?
Oh, they just discount totally. So like if we cuss or use foul language and then get mad at them for using foul language,
right?
That really messes them up. We know of a family that just will come drop their kids off at church, and then the parents go home, but then they get mad when their kids don't want to go to church. I mean, we just cannot be hypocritical like that.
It reminds me of Hartman Rector, who told the story. He was one of our general authorities back in the 70s and 80s, and even in the 90s a little bit. But he told the story of he was not a member of the church. He grew up as a non-member, but when he was 14 or 15, he was smoking with some of his friends. He was smoking cigarettes, and he said, so my father whipped me for doing that, but he had to put his pipe down to do it, you know. And that's, once again, that's kind of a hollow message, right? And so I think, Janie, even when we, you know, sometimes our children can catch us in lies. Sometimes we lie to other people. They'll hear us on the phone, or they'll hear us speaking to someone and saying, oh, we can't do that, we're out of town. And the kids are in the back seat of the car, and they know that, wait, we're not out of town. Why did? Yeah. And then they ask you about it, and you're like, well, we just didn't want to go with those people or whatever.
But you guys shouldn't never lie.
But also another, let's say another angle to that idea of being maybe it's not being a hypocrite, but it's certainly about telling them things and then not doing them. But boy, that's a big mistake, right? When you tell your children, hey, we're going to do this, so everyone get ready. At 5 o'clock, and then we decide,
actually, we're not.
We're not going to do that. And then, I mean, that does not go over real well. When we make promises
that we don't keep
to our children that we don't keep. And I know sometimes I was guilty of that. Even today, because you want to please your kids. You want them to have something to look forward to. And then after you tell them, yeah, we're going to go to blank, you're like, wait, I can't do that. I can't be there to do that. Anyway, so being true, being principled, having integrity,
being consistent,
being consistent, and once again, we can't expect our children to do things that we're not doing ourselves or that we're not willing to do. You know, Janie, one of the stories I remember well, and I just was at Education Week and got to sit in Randall Wright's classes and got to hear him tell it one more time. But years ago, back in the 90s, Randall came down to where we lived in Mesa, Arizona. I was the principal of the seminary building, and we had him speak to all of our seminary students at lunchtime. And I don't even remember what he talked about. I'm sure he gave a great talk. He always does. But then later that night, Randall was going to speak at a Know Your Religion lecture, which we don't even have anymore, but he was going to speak at that, I think like at 7, which he did. And then after that, he went to a movie. He just thought, I'm going to go to a movie by myself. And he actually had the thought cross his mind, you know what would be kind of weird is what if I went to kind of a questionable movie? I'm in Mesa, Arizona. I don't really know anyone down here. I live in Utah at the time. Maybe I'll just go watch this movie. He had that thought. He wasn't going to do it, but the thought just occurred. And then he goes up to the window to buy his ticket. And as he buys the ticket to, some perfectly clean, normal movie, the guy that he was buying the ticket from, whatever you call that person, what's he called?
The ticket boy.
the ticket guy. That ticket guy says, Brother Wright, it's so great to see you today. Loved your message at lunch today at the seminary building. And Randall just thought, oh my gosh, could you imagine what would have happened if I would have bought a ticket to a horrible movie, and then that young man who heard me saying one thing at lunchtime now watching me go into this R-rated movie. And that's a great...
How grateful he was that he had chosen to live what he preached. Consistent
with what he preached and what he believed. So another principle we've identified, if we want to really ruin our kids, I know we're just selling this so hardcore today, but would be to just not have any expectations for our kids. And it kind of goes back, Janie, to that idea of planning and having a plan and a purpose. But I know for our own children, we had expectations for each one of them. We wanted them to reach a level of some kind of attainment in different areas. We wanted them to be the best at whatever their talents or whatever their skill set allowed them to do. But I see parents today that have literally zero expectations for their children. And I remember one time as a bishop years ago calling a father in because we just weren't sure how to approach his son, who just seemed like he was floundering. And I said to this father, so do you know if your son is planning on going on a mission? He goes, yeah, I don't really know.
We've never talked about it.
Yeah, we've never really talked about that. And this kid was like 18, this was... So obviously there was no clear expectation set that in our home you go on missions or marry in the temple, or once again to be leaders, to be examples, to work hard, to try hard. Whatever the expectation is, and helping them forge some kind of identity. But it's just back to the idea that we don't really expect anything from them, so we don't really do anything with them.
Yeah, so we see parents that have no expectation, like they don't care about their schooling, or helping their kids along in school, or maintaining a certain,
work ethic,
certain grades
GPA.
at school. They don't care if they just play video games all day. They don't care, it's just like, well, it's their issue.
yeah. Which would be,
or like we talked about a minute, developing any talents. It's just kind of like whatever.
Kind of whatever happens, just whatever happens, And I love, Janie, something that President Dallin H. Oaks, has shared in a talk called "Where Will It Lead?" Or you could even say, begin with the end in mind. But where's that behavior going to lead 10 years from now? When you don't expect your child to go to church as a primary kid, what does that look like 10 years from now? Or when you don't expect them to ever clean up after themselves or to ever be disciplined in any way, what does that look like in 10 years? Because there's no way it's going to look really good.
Mark, and that feeds into the next one that we've kind of pinpointed is to ruin our kids. Just be a lazy parent. Just check out, give up, lay on the couch and play on your phone all day or work all day, or just be absentee parent, because that will definitely ruin your kids. It was interesting. I went to visit. I was out of town a couple weeks ago visiting one of my kids out of state, and I visited the primary with her. She's got a calling in primary, and there was this one child in the primary that was literally out of control. I have never seen a child like this before. Jumping over chairs, knocking over chairs, hitting other kids. This kid was probably about 9 or 10.
Oh, wow.
This wasn't a little child.
When you said that, I was expecting like 3 or 4.
No, it was a big kid. And everyone just acted like they didn't know this was going on. I was in the back like, wait, what? like,
am I supposed to do something? Or
And so they start singing time. This kid is running over, turning the lights off, climbing under the table, knocking all over the choristers,
books
pictures and props, and everyone just sat there like this was normal. I was 2 seconds from getting up and grabbing this kid myself, and I was a visitor. I've never seen anything like it. Anyway, in the meantime, his mom comes in and motions to him as he's hiding under the table. And the mom's like, come on. And they must have left early. So she takes him out, and they leave. And so after primary, I was asking my daughter, what in the world? Because at this point, I'm really thinking maybe something was wrong with him.
Yeah.
Maybe he's a special needs or something, because that's how, it was
kind
just.
Of appeared, yeah.
And she's like, oh, no, he acts this way every week. And I was like, what? And she's like, oh, yeah, his mom told me that they've literally just given up. They don't care anymore, that she doesn't know how to parent him. They've just, so she said she works full time. The dad works full time. And I think they do it just so they don't have to be home with this child. Yeah. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's so sad.
But it's kind of back to where will it lead? Like, what's
this lead?
What's that going to look like in 10 years?
Yeah, and I felt like he was just crying out for attention. Like he was just doing everything he could to get attention. Negative or positive, he was doing it, from everyone in the room.
Yeah.
But again, if you want to be a lazy parent, or if you want to ruin your kid, just play on your phone all day and don't pay attention to your kid. Just check out. We've told the story before about. Remember you telling me you had some clients that also had crazy kids. They felt like, and they didn't know what to do with them, and so they would just come home from work and lock themselves in their room.
Oh,
do you remember that? And their kids just ran wild and played video games. And again, where is that going to lead? I wonder where those people are right now today.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's a number one. If you want to ruin your kids, just check out.
Yeah.
Let the monkeys run the zoo.
Right. Here's another one that we've just kind of noticed over time. But it's this idea that, okay, all of our children are going to be jacked up, right, to some degree. They're all going to have an issue. I mean, they could have something wrong with them physically. Mentally, socially, emotionally, whatever. And one of the things, Janie, you just talked about checking out, but I can't believe how many parents I've seen check out of their own children's significant problems. Like some of them are physical. I mean, they actually need physical help, maybe even surgery for something, or major dental work, or some kind of mental or emotional problem. And once again, it's just surprising to see, you'll say, well, have you ever been to the doctor for that? No, we don't. Do you want to go to the dentist for that? Or do you want to go to get some counseling for that? Or anyway, it's just kind of a neglectful approach. But my belief always has been that you have to become an expert on your children's problem. Whatever your children's problem is, if they have anxiety, if you're a parent, you better become an expert on anxiety or depression or or
diabetes or whatever.
Yeah,
whatever you're dealing with.
If it's epilepsy, exactly. Whatever the problem is, the parent's first and prime job is to become an expert. Now, you've kind of have an example of that in our own extended family right now, where we have a nephew that's having some physical challenges, and we've watched his parents become incredible expert. I mean, they are doing research.
Oh, I bet his mom knows more than some of the doctors do on his condition, because she has studied it. She has anything she can get her hands on.
Right.
And she's charted everything. I mean, she's amazing.
And once again, no one is going to care more about your problems
and your
child's problems than you. I promise you. I mean, a doctor is dealing with a caseload of 500 patients a month. I mean, we've got to take the bull by the horns and take some responsibility for those kind of things.
Right. And if our child is struggling in school, let's find out why. Maybe if we need to get them tested, if they need glasses, if they need,
tutoring.
Yeah. If they just need some help paying attention or whatever it is, let's figure out what the problem is to help them succeed and become successful, wonderful adults and young adults.
Yeah, totally.
Here's one that I feel passionately about.
This is like your pet peeve, I think.
That a lot of people probably won't care about, but to me, this is really important, and it meant a lot to me and when I was raising our children. But I think parents who don't read to their children can ruin their children. And maybe not anything anyway big, but
they're not going to end up on Skid Row or anything.
But I think reading to our children is so important. I took a class at BYU early on children's literature.
Yeah.
And one of my favorite books was the statistics and the studies that have been done on how important it is to read to your children, way more than even having them read to you.
Yeah.
It's reading from the time that they can even sit in your lap and hearing that. I mean, people even said that even when you read to babies in utero, that they can hear their mother's voice. But I think it made such a difference in the lives of my children. When we had 8 kids, and a lot of times I was nursing mom. I had little ones, and that was my favorite time of day. I would pile everyone on the couch. We'd go into the library was our favorite thing, and they could each pick 5 books. We'd get home, we'd have 40 books by the time we came home, but we would just sit and read and read and read, and it's just a way to cuddle. It's a way to love. It's a time to snuggle and nurture and teach principles. And then as they get older, I've loved watching, as I've gone into the homes of many of our children this summer, to watch them reading to their children every night, novels and books, and the kids, it's like their favorite time of the day. They can't wait. They'll bring the book to their parents, like, please read this. And I just love it. To me, it's such a bonding time. It's a time to increase their intellectual capacity. It helps them listen. It helps them, in so many ways.
It helps them learn. It helps them to learn how to learn. It helps them to process. And I do think the children in our family who read the most are also the ones that are, really did well, academically in school. And
it helps them just in so many ways, verbally. And the studies and I've forgotten all the studies, but it just helps them in so many ways. But one of my favorite all-time quotes, it's from Strickland Gillian. He said, "You may have tangible wealth untold, caskets of jewels and coffers of gold, richer than I, you can never be. I had a mother who read to me." And so just to shout out moms, it's never too late, to start, even if they're teenagers. Let's get a cool novel, and sit down and read the Book of Mormon together. Whatever it is you're reading, gather the family together and, make a goal. Hey, if we read all of Harry Potter, if we read the Book of Mormon, whatever, the Bible, whatever you want to read as a family, and then reward yourself, and let's go to Disneyland at the end, or let's go to the beach, or do something, but make a fun goal about reading, or read the classics, whatever it is. But I think that's
make your home a reading home.
Yeah.
2 of my favorite memories, Janie, as we raised our children, one was you reading to the kids, because we have great pictures in scrapbooks of you with 2 or 3 kids on your lap and you're reading. I just love that. The second one is how you found a book on teaching your children to read from, in this case it was the Book of Mormon. I'm sure people have done it with the Bible and other things, but you're actually you taught our children to read from the scriptures.
Yeah, one of my favorite memories.
Yeah, amen. Great, you were doing that, and I was like having them jump off the roof onto the trampoline. So here's another one. You've heard us talk about this one before. I'm sure it'll never get old, though, because once again, we see it over and over. And it's when parents are not teaching their children the consequences of their behavior or letting the natural consequences occur. And sometimes that's not too big of a deal, right? They forgot their lunch at school, so we bring it up to them. Or we decide, okay, we're not going to bring it up to you, and you're going to learn the hard way. But there are other consequences that are a lot deeper than that for a lot more serious problems. And once again, we see parents bailing their children out. There's no consequences whatsoever for some pretty deviant behaviors that we've seen over time. And once again, by allowing our children to get away with those type of things without any kind of consequence is not a great message to send to our kids. Because once again, if we don't teach them and if we don't influence them, society will in some way, and they'll have to deal with even more horrific consequences later in their life. Along those lines, I think parents still struggle with the difference between agency and freedom. There are a lot of people that give their children freedom, but they call it agency. Because if it's real agency, then agency implies consequences, both good and bad, right? Where freedom is just kind of back to your lazy parenting, your hands off the wheel parenting, but there's no consequence. Just do whatever the heck you want and let's see how that goes. But that's not how the real world works, I don't think.
Okay, the next one, the best way, I'm convinced, in this society.
Yeah, this is the way right here.
If you want to ruin your kids, is allow them to have technology all the time, anytime they want it, unrestricted.
As young as they want to get it.
As young as you can get it. That is the way to ruin them.
Yeah.
Parents, we have got to, and I know a lot of parents, we've got passcodes and we've got all these things, but then we still allow them to take their phone to bed with them at night in their rooms. We let them have tablets in their room. We let them
they have free access.
TikTok and all these crazy apps, which has just been deemed to be so horrible. We let our 11-year-olds now have cell phones. It's like giving them a loaded gun.
Or an 8-year-olds, yeah.
It's crazy, the things that we're seeing. I mean, my elementary school grandkids are telling me that, there's kids in their class that have, iPhone 15s at age 8 and 9. And it's we're just literally handing them.
That's the kind of parent you would love to interview and just say, hey, no, tell us, we're super curious, not trying to be mean or anything, but just really curious why you would hand your second grader an iPhone 15 or whatever. And I wonder if they would say, well, it's so we can keep track of them, and I don't know what they would say, but there's
all kinds of devices that you can do that without handing them the internet.
Yeah.
24/7. And if we do, we cannot, even our older kids who have smartphones, let's not, make them park it in our rooms overnight. They do not need to have those phones all through the night, because the studies have shown that they're on them all night long. They're getting text messages. They're, getting all kinds of crazy things.
Their friends are up at 3 a.m. They're sending them weird pictures and lewd pictures.
And the studies now that just the younger you are when you get a cell phone, the higher the depression, the higher the anxiety rate. There's so many horrible studies that parents, this is one area we cannot let go of the wheel. We have got to be vigilant. We have got to tighten up. We have got to do all the studies. Again, Jonathan Haidt's book on anxious generation. And
what does he say? He proposes that no one gets a cell phone until they're
Until they're 16 or at least gone through puberty, because that's how messed up the studies and the research he's done. Our children are literally being destroyed by social media, by technology. And if we are not careful, that is the best way that we are going to mess our kids up, especially young girls. Well, and then boys with the pornography that's and young women now are starting to be addicted to pornography. And so we've got to really be vigilant in this area.
We've said this before, but the prestigious journal called The Atlantic ran a story a few years ago, and the title of the story was, "Have iPhones Ruined a Generation?" And if I wrote that article, it would just be really short. It'd be just one word: yes, right? That's all we would have.
Yes.
We've seen the mental illness that has just increased drastically, that's directly correlated with smartphone usage and social media. Anyway, so amen, Janie, amen to that for sure. Janie, maybe the one that runs in second place compared to the one you just shared about technology would be if you want to ruin your children, just do not encourage them. Do not expect them to work. Don't teach them how to work. Just assume that maybe one day they'll learn that on their own. But talk about a way to ruin children in so many ways. I mean, work is such an important principle and concept and value to help them to become successful in life. I mean, face it, the only successful people in life are people that have a work ethic. I mean, that's got to be the common denominator for sure. And so now we have a generation, it's not uncommon for so many people out there to actually graduate from high school, go into college, and they still have not ever worked for anyone in their life.
Everything.
Not even chores at home, right?
Yeah, everything's been handed to them. Well, I was just listening to a podcast recently where it had employers who they say that they have fired or won't even hire now Gen Z employees because they've had such horrible experiences.
Yeah.
And I know it's funny, and sometimes we watch these funny memes, on social media, but you hear these phrases like quiet quitting or lazy girl job or minimum Mondays,
So there's actually a thing called minimum Mondays. What is this?
Where Gen Z has decided on Mondays, they're going to go in and do the bare minimum. They're recovering from the weekend. They got to chill.
What do they call Sunday? You told me something earlier.
So Sunday is called Sunday Scaries because they all get so worked up and worried about having to go back to work on Monday. This is a real syndrome.
Okay.
And that people get really anxious and depressed because they have to go back to their job on Monday. And so that starts on Sunday, and then Monday they go in and it's minimum Monday. And so everybody just does the bare minimum on Monday.
Yeah.
This is a real thing.
Okay.
Quiet quitting means if they just won't show up. If they don't like their job or if they're not in the mood to wake up that morning, they just quit.
But they quit, but they don't tell anyone, right?
Tell anyone.
So this is kind of like another form of ghosting, right? You just quit showing up, and then maybe a month later they recognize that okay,
yeah.
All right, this is good.
And another syndrome is the lazy girl job. It's what it's called, is they're looking for a lazy girl job, which means they just want to sit at a desk and maybe answer phones or, hand people a clipboard and get paid $100,000 a year for it. Mm-hmm. And so they want to do the bare minimum, but they want to be paid this lavish amount.
The maximum.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, people were talking about this, and I was literally just like, what? Like, I'm just in awe. But it's a real syndrome right now, that they come out of school expecting to be paid top dollar, like what their parents, have earned after 50 years. And, but again, have never worked. One lady employer was talking about, she hired a girl to come work in the law firm, and she'd been there like a few days and walked into her office and she had her feet up on the desk. She had a blanket on her legs. She had her, coffee maker going in the background, and she was just chatting with friends on her phone. So lady had to fire her,
Wow.
I mean, they just
that was like her first week on the job.
Yeah. And so we have to prepare our children to go out into the workforce. That's just not even reality. To achieve anything in life, it takes work. It takes effort just to even get good grades, to graduate from college, to develop a talent.
Well,
and
even
work is a principle of the gospel.
Right.
So...
Well, you and I have talked about this, but even to be a parent, I mean, if you're going to be a good father or mother, you got to be the hardest working person in the neighborhood. I mean, it all takes work. It takes effort. It takes energy and devotion. But if we want our children to be independent, if we don't want them living in our basement at age 40, then we have to help them develop this hardcore, awesome work ethic. Plus, there's so much research that tells us that children who work have the highest self-worth scores and self-esteem, right?
Exactly.
They feel good about themselves.
Exactly. And those that don't, we can't just hand them trophies just because, we can't just blow sunshine, up their ego, to make them feel good. That's not legit. And they know that they don't have skills. They know, they feel it inside. But children that work, that have skills, that work hard, that accomplish things, they feel good about themselves, and they know that they can keep accomplishing. And that is where the real self-worth comes.
Yeah, I love that. That's great.
And again, we've talked about this before, but there's a generation of parents now who want to protect and bubble wrap their children from anything hard. They just want them to have a fun life. Just go enjoy. I'll handle everything. We'll let the maid clean your room. You you don't need to help. Mommy and daddy will do everything so you can just enjoy life and play.
And you've just robbed your kid of the most important skill in life they needed to learn.
Right. And again, these are successful, wonderful parents who have worked hard their whole life, and they have become something and accomplished so much, but now they're undoing exactly what is best for their children and would help their children become like them. And the principle is we can help teach our children and grandchildren that work is fun. I mean, you little kids love it. When you're vacuuming, they love to get their little play vacuum. When you're doing dishes, where do they want to be? Up there doing dishes.
Right.
Let's start that at the beginning and teach our children that those are fun things. Teach them how to cook. Teach them how to clean a room. Teach them how to clean a toilet. Teach them how to mow a lawn. There's great satisfaction in walking out and seeing those straight lines in the lawn.
Well, yeah, and once again, I remember when our children were teenagers, that was the fun part, right? That you're working together side by side and talking about things, and that's when they start asking you questions about things they may have never asked before, and it's a cool time for parents and their children to bond together when you're working together.
And I think it just point out at the end of a day what a good day of work feels like. When you come in exhausted, but you've accomplished so much. When your yard is weeded and mowed and everybody in the family's contributed and you've got the garden all planted and look what a good feeling.
Look what we did.
We're all exhausted, but wow, what a good feeling.
I know.
And to point that out to children.
Right. The last one I think we're going to share today is this idea of, okay, if you want to really ruin your kid, don't turn them to God. Don't turn them to a higher power. Don't ever talk about Christ in our LDS sense. Don't talk about the gospel. Don't talk about the restoration. Don't talk about the atonement. But saying that sounds so ridiculous, but in truth, we do know people that kind of live that way, right? I mean, really the only exposure their children really get of our faith or of their faith is what happens maybe on Sunday, and that's if they go.
And then we even know some parents that take it further than that I'm not going to teach my children because as they get older, they can figure it out for themselves.
Yeah.
And which is even a bigger crime.
Yeah.
And ruins kids.
Right.
And then again, how did that turn out for you?
Well, Elder Christofferson said something about that very powerful, but he said to be neutral about the gospel is to deny the existence of God. I mean, that's pretty crazy, right?
And again, and I think that's true for anyone in any religion. Even if you're not a member of our church, of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, if you're a devout Catholic or you're a devout Jew or if you're a devout Muslim or Protestant, take your kids to church. Teach them the gospel. Point them towards Jesus or the higher power, whatever you believe in.
Yeah.
But to be a faithless family or, to do nothing with your children leaves them literally anchorless and just blowing in the wind and with no values, no direction. We need to be open and share what we believe, to share our faith, to share our testimony. Again, no matter what religion we are.
Yeah. It's really interesting, Janie. There's this narrative, this horrible narrative in our country that religion is bad for people. And, religion causes people to be depressed. Religion causes people to be anxious. Religion causes all these problems. But the irony is that's not what the research says. The research says just the opposite. People who are religious and practice their religion have less depressive symptoms. Same is true with teenagers. Well, also, religion is actually really, really good for teenagers. Those teenagers who practice their religious faith, who attend meetings with their family on a Sunday, what does the research say? They do better academically. They do better socially. They do better when it comes to mental and emotional health. They actually do better physically. The data is incredible. They're happier. The data is quite incredible what religion does for people if they'll just practice it. Religion isn't harmful. It's helpful.
Right. So let's teach our children our faith. Let's take them to church. I think that's so important. I found this really cute little meme on my feed the other day, and I just had to copy it because I thought it was so cute. But it said, getting everyone up is hard on Sundays. Getting everyone dressed is hard on Sundays. Getting to church is hard on Sundays. But Mama, there's a reason the enemy doesn't make it easy. Come in tired, come in messy, come in late. It'll all be worth it. Just come and be filled up on Sundays. And that's so true. So true. If we all had that attitude, just come. You're never you never regret.
You'll never regret that.
Yeah. And it just develops that faith and structure for our children.
Amen.
So in closing, we kind of had a fun putting these together. I mean, a lot of these are experiences that we've had, that we've done to ruin our children, or to hopefully they're not ruined, but mistakes we've made, mistakes we've seen in others, mistakes we've seen around. And again, we've probably done all of these, but for LDS, let's do something. Is there something that kind of struck out to you, or could you think of something maybe that's going on in your home that you're doing that you need to change? And with an invitation to work on that and to change that, because we all have areas that we need to change and do better at.
Just find that one little small thing. We're not asking anyone to make a gigantic revolutionary change, but there's always one thing we can do better, right? And just think about that and find a way to implement it. Get your family on board so they'll work on it too. Everyone, thank you for being with us today. We always enjoy this time together, and we look forward to being with you next time. Have a wonderful, awesome week.
Go love your family.